And welcome to another episode of Primility Primer, our morning reminder of the power of balancing pride and humility as we go about our daily lives. This is episode number 57. I am your host, Jared Morris, and it is Wednesday, which means that it is time for another edition of Wisdom Wednesday. And I especially love editions of Wisdom Wednesday when the quote is sent in by a Primility reader or listener. And that is the case today, as Primility audience member Grant sent me in this quote. And it's a quote from a person that we've quoted before, someone who clearly spent a lot of time thinking about these elements of pride and humility. And in fact, there's an entire article about pride and humility on this person's institute's website, which I'll get to in a future edition of Primility Primer. But the person I'm talking about is C.S. Lewis. And of course, we've quoted him before with his famous quote on humility. Humility is not thinking less of yourself, but thinking of yourself less. And I love that quote. We cite it often. The quote that Grant sent in from C.S. Lewis is about pride. And I will preface it by saying that I really, really like the quote, but I only partially agree with it. And so I'll state the quote and then we'll talk about it. Talk about what it means and why I only agree with it partially. So here's the quote. Pride gets no pleasure out of having something, only out of having more of it than the next man. That quote again, pride gets no pleasure out of having something, only out of having more of it than the next man. And look, a lot of times when we talk about, pride and humility in these words, the way that we define the words is going to dictate the conversation. And even though words have very specific definitions in different contexts, they can mean different things and they can mean different things to different people. And to some people, especially those who I think are, what's the best way to say this, very strictly religious based. And I think a lot of what C.S. Lewis talked about was founded in religion. Pride has a more negative connotation sometimes than what we talk about here. I don't think that's right or wrong. It just kind of is what it is. Pride being one of the 7 deadly sins and all. And I think here on Primility, we really have a more nuanced view of pride. There's kind of like this spectrum, right? Where you've got pride, you've got humility, and then at the very end of pride, you've got conceit and arrogance, and along the way you run into vanity. And then over here on the side of humility, all the way at the end, you've got meekness, right? And so it's kind of this big spectrum, and there's lots of different places for different definitions to fit in depending on the context. And so I certainly agree with this quote in the sense of when your pride has drifted into that excess part, right? When it's more of a conceit, when it's more of an arrogance. Now, as we look at the quote again, now we're not getting the pleasure out of having the thing, only out of having more of it than the next person, because it's all about how we view ourselves in comparison to other people and being better than that person, right? Because I think there's a quiet inner confidence that allows us to take real pride in our accomplishments and in the things that our accomplishments can get us. I mean, I'm doing this Primility Primer right now from the house that Heather and I bought last November. And there's a sense of pride when I look around and when I see the house and I look up here and I see my diploma from Indiana University. Those are things, and I get pride out of them. And it's not a pride of, hey, that guy didn't have his diploma and I do, or, I have a house and they don't. It has nothing to do with that. But I think there is a certain sense of pride that you can have from achieving up to your potential, or getting the most out of yourself, or working hard and getting something out of it. And so I think, for me, a quote like this, it would have more meaning to me personally if it were really, you just have to add one word, right? Excess pride gets no pleasure out of having something, only out of having more of it than the next man. Because when we get past that kind of quiet inner confidence and the confidence that is only comparing what we have to what we, to our goals and to our objectives and to what we know we could have done if we had worked hard. Once we get past that, and it's just about, I want to have more than that person. And well, that person has a more expensive car than me, so I've got to get a bigger car because I need to be better than them. Well, now humility is all out the door, because now we're not really thinking about other people. right? We're just thinking about how we are in comparison to other people. And that doesn't really do us any good. And it's driven by a vanity, it's driven by an insecurity that can't simply have an inner peace about what we have and what we've done. It has to compare it to other people, and it has to be better, because that's where we draw our self-worth from. So I think there's a great deal of wisdom in this quote, which is why I wanted to bring it here. But just taken on its face, it seems to have a very negative connotation of pride. And when we talk about pride here at Primility, we don't have a negative connotation of pride itself. We have a negative connotation of pride that runs rampant, that is unbridled, that doesn't have humility to pull it back, right? And say it's not about having more than someone. It's about having what I have can help other people. Or it's just about getting the most out of myself that I can, achieving the most that I can, but it's not about simply being better than that person. What can I do to help that person? I don't mind if that person gets a house as big or bigger than mine, right? I'm doing the best that I can. I want other people to do the best that I can. And I think that's the essence of Primility. And there's a good pride that's in there. I'm not a fan of coloring pride all with the negative brush. I realize that can be difficult. It's certainly simpler to live in a black and white world where words or concepts are good or bad. But I think the reality of it is, especially when we talk about anything in the context of balance, as we do with Primility, a lot of times it's a spectrum, and a lot of times there are gray areas, and we have to learn how to navigate those gray areas. And I think that is, for me, why the concept of Primility has always been helpful, because when you get into the gray area, all you have to kind of do is figure out, okay, am I a little bit more on this side? Am I a little bit more on that side? And depending on where you are, make that next decision with the other side in mind to flip it, pull you back in the middle, get that balance, and then you find the sweet spot. But Grant, thank you very much for sending that over. I appreciate it. And I love it when you all send these. So whenever you find quotes, anything, little nuggets, little articles, whatever it is, please send them to me, jared@primility.com. I always love discussing them on these primers, and I love getting the emails when you send them. Thank you very much for tuning in to this episode of Primility Primer. I will also remind you to go to primility.com/join, get on the email list. Not only will you get our Friday digest that provides a summary of each episode so that you can get caught up on Friday if you miss episodes during the week, but you will also get our Monday morning email. It's 250 words or less. It's a positive thought to start your week. If you get on the email list, you will get both of those, along with your opportunity to get your red Primility wristband if you want to. Thank you for listening. I'll be back tomorrow with another episode of Primility Primer. In the meantime, stay cognizant of your pride and humility, and we will talk soon. Wrist bump.